The dog brought home a tiger cub for the man. A few minutes later, something terrible happened. It was a cold evening, the kind where the air pressed heavily against the skin, and the silence of the vast landscape hung like a shroud. The man sat on the edge of his porch, staring at the line of trees that marked the border of the forest. His old dog beside him, ears twitching at the faintest rustle. Then, a sound broke the quiet, a soft whimper muffled by the distance. The dog perked up, its fur bristling slightly. It stood tail still, its eyes fixed on the forest beyond. The man followed the dog's gaze but saw nothing at first. It was just the dusk settling in, but then the dog moved, trotting with purpose toward the tree line. The man rose, curiosity catching him. It wasn't like the dog to wander off on its own. He followed, steps steady in the cold. The dog returned, but this time it carried something in its mouth. At first glance, the bundle seemed too large for its jaws, but the small form was unmistakable. The dog dropped the cub gently on the ground, then backed away. The man knelt slowly, taking in the sight before him. A tiger cub, not even a month old, its fur still soft and delicate, eyes barely open. There was a stillness to the creature, its body limp, but its chest rose and fell faintly. A strange wave of sorrow passed over the man. He knew the risks of a cub like this being so far from its mother. But what had brought it here? And why did his dog bring it to him? The tiger cub's survival seemed uncertain. There was no movement, no sound from it, and yet something in its fragile form stirred a deep, urgent sense of duty. The man gently scooped the cub into his arms, feeling its warmth. He turned back toward his home, the weight of the moment pressing in. What had his dog found? A new life, struggling to find its way, perhaps? As the man walked, his dog followed quietly, its usual playfulness replaced with something gentler, more protective. It was clear that it too understood the gravity of the moment. Inside, the man placed the tiger cub gently on a warm towel. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the room, casting flickering shadows across the walls. He paused, assessing the situation with careful attention. This was no ordinary animal. There was something almost fragile about the way it lay there, its small form barely moving, its breaths shallow and erratic. The man had worked with many animals over the years, but never one like this. He knew the risks, that the cub might not survive, that it had been separated from its mother too long. Yet there was no other option now but to try. He dipped a cloth in water and gently wiped the cub's face. The tiger's fur felt soft under his touch, its small body trembling faintly. The man could hear the faint rattle of its breath as he watched. It was a sound that would stay with him, fragile, uncertain, almost too quiet. After a few minutes, the man went to the kitchen and gathered what he thought might help. A mixture of warm milk and honey, just enough to sustain the cub. He returned and gently lifted its head, trying to guide the bottle to its lips. The cub's eyes fluttered, its body stiff in resistance. The man persisted, whispering soft words of reassurance as if his presence alone could calm the animal. But the cub turned its head weakly, refusing to drink. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of the responsibility. He could feel time ticking away, each second precious. How many chances would this cub have? For hours he tried. He wiped the cub's mouth, offered it food again, rubbed its back, doing everything he could to bring life into that still form. The dog remained by his side, its soft gaze never leaving the cub. It was as though the dog too had taken on the role of protector. Outside, the night deepened. The wind picked up, causing the windows to rattle slightly. But inside there was a strange stillness. The fire burned low. The man, now exhausted, sat quietly beside the cub, his hand gently resting on its side. He hadn't left for hours, his entire focus on this tiny creature in need of help. Then, just as the night seemed to stretch on endlessly, the cub stirred. Its body shifted slightly, a faint movement of its paws. The man's breath caught in his chest, his heart racing. It wasn't much, but it was something. The cub's body wasn't as cold as before, and its breath, though still shallow, was steadier. He stayed there, not daring to move as the cub's breathing became more rhythmic. It was slow, but it was enough to lift his spirits. The man gently placed his hand on the cub's side again, as if offering support, as if telling the cub that it wasn't alone. The dog, sensing the shift, moved closer. It lay down beside them, its head resting on the floor, a quiet guardian. Hours passed. With each minute, the cub's movements became more purposeful. A small twitch of its tail, a soft, strained mew that echoed through the room like a whisper of hope. It was not fully out of danger yet, but the man could feel a shift. The fragile creature was beginning to trust, beginning to fight for its own survival. The room was still. There was no need for words. The battle for the cub's life was far from over, but for the first time since it arrived, there was a flicker of hope. The sun rose slowly, its pale light slipping through the window as the man looked over at the cub, now lying on a blanket in the corner of the room. It was stronger, its limbs less fragile, its movements more confident. The small, weak creature that had arrived just days ago had begun to show the quiet strength of its nature. It still wasn't fully recovered. There were moments when the cub's breathing grew faint, and the man would quickly check on it, his hand resting gently on its side. But today was different. Today the cub was alert, its wide eyes taking in the room around it, its ears flicking with curiosity. The man stood quietly in the doorway, watching the cub as it stretched its legs. He had never imagined that this would be his role, to care for a tiger, to nurture it through a fragile moment in its life. Yet here they were, bound by something neither of them could quite name. Outside, the world was waking up. The air was crisp with the promise of the day, and the wind carried with it the sense of the forest. The man could feel the pull of the land outside, the wild that was the cub's true home. The cub had made it through the night. It was strong enough now to face what lay ahead. The man's thoughts were quiet but heavy. It was time. Time for the cub to return to where it belonged. He stepped toward the cub, kneeling beside it. He placed a hand on its back, feeling the warmth of its body beneath his palm. For a moment, the cub looked up at him, its eyes reflecting a trust that had been built over the past few days. The man's heart tightened at the thought of releasing it, but he knew it was right. With a soft breath, the man gently lifted the cub. He walked slowly to the door, glancing at the dog, who followed quietly behind. The cub seemed to understand, its movements more certain now, its body no longer trembling with uncertainty. As they reached the edge of the forest, the man stopped. He looked back, his eyes lingering on the cub as if to say goodbye without words. The dog sat beside him, its tail still. There was no need for more. The cub stood for a moment, its tiny body still as it gazed out into the trees beyond. The man could feel the pull of nature on the cub, urging it forward. And then, without hesitation, the cub took its first steps into the wild. It moved slowly at first, its steps tentative, but each one carried it closer to where it belonged. The man watched in silence as the cub walked, its body now in rhythm with the earth, the wild calling it home. The cub paused once, looking back over its shoulder, as if to acknowledge the man who had helped it survive, who had been there when it was at its weakest. The man gave a small nod, a silent farewell, and then the cub turned and disappeared into the trees. The man stood there for a long while, watching the forest where the cub had vanished. He didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. With a soft sigh, the man turned to the dog, giving it a gentle pet. The two of them walked back toward the house, the quiet of the forest surrounding them. The day was just beginning, but in that moment, the world felt still, as if it too was honoring the bond that had been formed. The man stepped inside, but the weight of the moment stayed with him, a quiet peace that would carry with him forever. The cub was free, as it should be, and the man had played his part in its journey. And in that silence, the connection between them, and wild and human, and would remain.